Thank you, Presiding Officer. I too, as other members have already said, want to thank the SEAC Committee and its clerks and the convener who's here and the advisers for producing this important report. This report highlights that devolution is under relentless attack from the UK Government, and the committee's inquiry highlights that there are widespread concerns about the future of devolution given the approach of the current UK Government. The inquiry has shown that since the UK has left the EU, the UK Government has been intent on regulatory divergence across the UK. And the committee's report has also shown that the UK Government is disrupting intergovernmental relationships across the UK, but also with European countries and others across the world. The Scottish Parliament was reconvened because the people in Scotland voted for it, but the Westminster Government is rolling back on that democratic process, and this must be called out. Presiding Officer, the ability of the Scottish Parliament to legislate on devolved matters should be restated. Evidence to the committee indicated that the UK Government viewed itself to be superior over devolved legislatures. However, there must be recognition that there is no hierarchy of governments. Each has its own powers and each has its own responsibilities. There should be a commitment to working together with mutual respect and cooperation among the governments of the UK as equals. Presiding Officer, I'm a member, as you are, of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, and BIPA promotes intergovernmental relations, and it's exactly what the Assembly, the BIPA, aims to do. We bring parliamentarians together, the different legislatures in Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man. The members come together to discuss legislation, we share ideas, we hear from experts, and we promote good, positive intergovernmental relationships, and we'll look at current and proposed legislation on how we can improve the lives for our own people in our own respective areas. Maybe the UK Government should learn from the BIPA colleagues and see if we can take forward better intergovernmental work in that way. This is important, but as the committee report and inquiry has shown, the UK Government is systematically working to erode intergovernmental relations and cooperation through its obsession with ideological politics. The committee's inquiry has made clear that the governments should cooperate through negotiation and consensus using agreed intergovernmental processes such as common frameworks, which others have mentioned, instead of the UK Government centralising and imposing its views using the formal powers of the Westminster Parliament. It is clear that there must be a return to the previous constitutional norm in that the Sewell Convention is always followed, underpinned by proper legal duties on the UK Government. Not the current system we have where, should this Parliament, for example, refuse to give consent to a UK statutory instrument, the UK Government just ploughs ahead anyway. It is not consensus, and again, as the committee stated, it's another example of the UK Government eroding devolution. Presiding Officer, Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU, with every one of Scotland's 32 council areas choosing to reject Brexit in 2016. Contrary to Better Together promises of Scotland being an equal partner in the UK in 2014, Scotland's wishes were completely ignored by Westminster after the EU referendum. People, businesses and communities in Scotland are now paying a heavy price for a hard Brexit that we rejected, that's imposed by a Tory government that nobody voted for in Scotland. On top of the threat to Scottish democracy, the staggering economic cost of Brexit Britain is clear. The committee inquiry has shown that against our democratic will and in the midst of unprecedented crisis, Scotland has been removed from a market worth £16 billion in exports to Scottish companies at a time of Brexit, which by population is 7 times the size of the UK. The Office for Budget Responsibility expects that the UK GDP to be 4% lower in the long run because of Brexit, equivalent to a £3 million drop in public revenues for Scotland every single year. The Scottish Government modelling shows that Scotland's economy and social well-being are disproportionately impacted by Brexit, with Scotland's GDP set to be £9 billion lower in 2016 cash terms by 2030. That's a 6.1% cut compared to the continued EU membership. There is no group of people or sector of the economy that the Brexiteering UK government is not willing to sacrifice on the altar of Brexit. Presiding Officer, the final point I want to make, actually maybe before that, I will pick up what Jackie Dunbar said about food standards. Scotland, one of the things that in my work on previous Rural Committee, I picked up the issue of US and UK trade arrangements. The Food and Drug Administration in America have an acceptable level of defects handbook, and that's used in the States, and that allows a certain percentage of defects in food products. And in Scotland, we have no say over trade agreements, and the Scottish Parliament has no input or no control, and the UK government legislates that for us. And these are products that I won't bring them to the chamber today, but if I've raised it in other debates, but there are issues with mould, mites, insect parts and rat poo, if anybody wants to talk to me later about it. But my final point, Presiding Officer, is that what we need to look at is making a point about disrespect of the UK government that they've shown to this democratic parliament. We do need to look at what solutions we need to take forward. And indeed, one of the issues that I have is there's been numerous examples of cabinet secretaries and ministers on their feet in this chamber stating that they have written to a UK government minister and had no replies. Indeed, I've written to the Scottish Secretary, who is also my MP in Dumfries and Galloway, on 19 separate occasions, and I've never once had a reply, even on matters of casework. So maybe I should hand-deliver those letters to the Queen Elizabeth House round the corner, Presiding Officer. It's time for this disrespect to end, and as the committee report shows, it's time for devolution to be protected, Presiding Officer.